All right, let's get started then. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Construction Health and Safety for Plant Operations webinar, which is hosted by Civil Contractors New Zealand and the Construction Health and Safety New Zealand. I'm Peter Silcock, I'm Chief Executive of Civil Contractors New Zealand. Just like to start with a little bit of housekeeping before we get going. So this webinar is due to run for around about 40 minutes. And we'll have time for questions at the end. If there's anything you'd like to ask us, please use the chat panel on the right-hand side. So that's the speech bubble with the three dots on it. Just click on that and put your questions in there. As you know, the focus is going to be on health and safety for Tier 2 plant operators. But we're also going to have a short introduction about the role, structure and activities of Construction Health and Safety New Zealand. So first of all, I'd like to just introduce the speakers. As you know, I work for Civil Contractors New Zealand. We're a representative organisation representing New Zealand's civil contractors. We have around about 400 member contractors nationwide. And in addition, we have a lot of businesses who provide support to contractors with equipment and services who are associate members. Presenting with me today is Chris Alderson, who is Chief Executive of Construction Health and Safety New Zealand, or CHASNZ, as we say for short. So you'll hear that word, I'm sure, a few times on this webinar, CHASNZ.
Thanks, Peter. Very pleased to be here.
And Chris was appointed to his role late last year, and he'll give us a quick overview of what CHASNZ is all about. We also have John Harper-Slade here today.
Hi, Peter.
John is the General Manager of Skills and Competency at CHASNZ. And he's going to take us on a more in-depth exploration of ConstructSafe, and in particular the new Tier 2 competencies for plant operations. So let's get underway with the first slide we'll go through. Civil Contractors New Zealand has been a very strong supporter of CHASNZ and its predecessor organisation, Construction Health and Safety Council. Unfortunately, we have far too many fatalities and people who suffer injuries and ill health as a result of working in our industry. And due to the nature of the contracting industry, we have people who move between jobs and between sites, and therefore having some industry standards and also some industry leadership is really important to us having good health and safety. So CHASNZ provides both strong leadership in a way for the industry to standardise requirements and therefore raise standards, reduce injuries and poor health outcomes, and of course fatalities. And I'd like to as we're starting, to congratulate both Chris and John in the work that they do for CHASNZ. It's been very positive, and I'd now like to pass across to Chris so he can talk to us a little bit more about CHASNZ and its role.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Look, CHASNZ has been around for around about 12 months now. So I think in the last week we had our 1-year anniversary. We're a charitable trust, so we're a not-for-profit organisation, and we're really run by the industry for the industry. So there's no sort of money making or other sort of agenda here other than to get construction in New Zealand to what we would like to see from a world-class health and safety perspective. So we're set up really to try and be a cross-industry leadership body to bring together all the different parts of construction, because we know it's a really wide sector. We think there's around about 300,000 construction related workers in New Zealand, according to MB. And as part of our work, we also administer the ConstructSafe tool on behalf of the industry. So again, we're really the administrator of that tool, which is again owned by the industry, and essentially what's in that tool is what industry gives us. So I'll just go to the next slide. Look, we do have some aspirational goals from the CHASNZ point of view. We want to be world class in health and safety. And what that really means is we don't want to be a follower anymore. And you've probably all been aware that we've tended in health and safety to follow what's happening in Australia, what's happening in the UK, what's happening in Canada and other places. Sometimes 2 to 3 years later, we'd really like to change that and see New Zealand really punching above its weight in this area and starting to lead here. Look, we'd also like to see, a lot more unity and cohesion across the industry because, as I said before, it's a fragmented industry from a standards point of view. So we would like to see it simplified so people actually know what the standards are and what to do. We'd like to see the workforce really engaged and empowered as well, because sometimes health and safety is seen as something that gets in the way of their job or something they do after they've done their job. They then come and do some health and safety. We'd really like to change that dynamic as well, so it's seen as an integral part of really just good operations and good business. And look, we'd really like to see a step change, definitely within 5 years, but we'd like to make a difference within 2. So as Peter said, we're about 1 year in now, and hopefully you're going to be seeing some of the changes come through and say, hey, look, CHASNZ is making a difference. So like, as I said, we're a charitable trust, and you can go to the CHASNZ website, chasnz.org, and have a look at our board membership. And this board membership really reflects a lot of the different aspects of construction. So, right at the top there, we've got the regulator, WorkSafe. So they can talk to us from an industry perspective. We've got the vertical or commercial building sector represented by Rick Hurd from Naylor Love. We've got residentials in there. So Nigel Smith from Milestone. We've got SMEs, so Graham Smith, the president of Specialist Trade Contractors. Downers are there from the civil point of view. And then we've got some clients, because we believe that clients are, what clients say and do can be disproportionately influential across the construction supply chain. So Shane Allison represents public clients. So he's the CEO of AT, and Susan Hurrier is the deputy chair of Naitahu Property, and she represents private clients. We've got Bill Newson there from Etu, and Darryl Lee Wenderborn from Becker, who represents professionals. And recently we had Brett Murray, who's the CEO of ConstructSafe, join our board. And what Brett brings is the voice and the view of the training organisations. So who he's representing there isn't ConstructSafe per se; it's all the training organisations that we believe serve the construction industry. So, look, we have some high priority items we're working on at the moment. The safety competency assessment is right up there, probably number 1 at the moment, because we know that competencies is really important. And what we need to see is a really good test of competency that the industry sets, and really good training that supports that competency. So CHASNZ doesn't do the training. We rely on the likes of the training industry to do that. But what we can do is send them a very good signal for what we'd like to see trained. So that's why we have the likes of Brett, and we talk to other training organisations as well, the impacts, the safety and actions, etc. So other things we're doing, and this is pre-qualification. So we know at the moment that pre-qual is a bit of a mess. And what we're trying to do is simplify the system. So what we're trying to do here is create a cross-certification of the pre-qual schemes. So instead of particularly small contractors having to do multiple pre-qualifications, you'll just have to do one that complies, and then we'll apply across multiple clients. So we're not creating a new pre-qual system. We're basically creating a single standard that the other pre-quals will then align to, and then we can get that cross-qualification going. We're doing some work with our data, so we don't have enough data about what happens at the moment. We know that a lot of organisations have data, so we're getting organisations to share data. Of course, we're working on mental health. It's a hot topic at the moment, so we need to make sure that we understand what are the issues in construction and be seen to be doing something about it, so that's a big program for us. Safety metrics, let's all measure the same stuff the same way. And then really forming advisory groups. So as I said before, that board that I showed you have a dual role. First of all, they're directors of the trust. Secondly, they're also there to represent the sectors. So they're forming advisory groups. So civil advisory group, which CCNZ help us with, the verticals, training, etc. So essentially, that's our priorities at the moment. I'd like to come back to the safety competency assessment because that's where ConstructSafe comes in. It's a really important tool. It's a great tool. It's a great asset for the industry. We'd like to see it sweated more and used more and be seen to really expand out beyond the tier one. So that's why we're here today talking about it. And there's no better person to talk about it than John Harper-Slade, who I'll get to take over from this slide.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So what I thought I would do over the next 15-20 minutes is just give you a reminder and an overview of ConstructSafe, and then also show you some detail around the plant operator competency scheme that we have aligned in our ConstructSafe Tier 2. So just to bring, I'm making an assumption that most people who are on the webinar or watching this, the recording, have engaged with ConstructSafe at some point in recent history. ConstructSafe is a worker competency certification scheme. The idea around ConstructSafe is to augment and work with the training industry. So the training and competency system wouldn't work if we only did training. And nor would it work if we only did competency assessment. It's really important that we've got a system that delivers training for our people to help them develop and to learn, and to have competency certification to confirm that our people are meeting the standards that industry set for themselves, and also to identify those people who don't meet those standards, to give them the correct help and learning support so that they can meet those standards in the future. So that's really the thinking around ConstructSafe. As probably most of you already know, there's more than one part to the ConstructSafe system. Most people will have engaged already with our foundation, health and safety competency test. This is the test that applies to everybody that works in the construction industry and really helps us understand whether people know and do the things consistently that keep themselves and others safe. What we've also got in the system are specific assessments for different trades and occupations, tests for supervisors, leading hands and foremen, tests for pit management at Tier 4, and then some tests for professionally qualified occupations. So this is just an example of some of the Tier 2 and Tier 5 tests that are either available now or currently in development. This is where the plant operator competency scheme sits. So what I'm going to do now is just take you through the plant operator competency scheme. And so why did we do this? So the plant operator competency scheme came out of some thinking that was done back in November 2015 when the civil industry came together under the leadership of New Zealand Transport Agency to solve a problem around inconsistency around the way that people measure plant operator competency. So really the problem that was identified, that there wasn't a systematic approach to assessing competency and sharing information around the New Zealand civils industry where most of the plant operators work. And that really correlated with the need that 34% of all fatalities in the construction industry as a whole are around mobile plant and vehicles. So actually there's a really good health and safety reason why we work with industry to develop this, and also a really good system reason in terms of the duplication and repetition of effort that was going on to have a consistent system that's cross-recognized by everybody. So in 2016, a group was put together, representative of industry, to build the system, and they worked together for about a year and a half to build the competency frameworks, the tests, but more importantly, and I think that the real key difference here is the in-field verification tool and assessment system that augments it. And I'll going to go forward and just show how all this works really. So what I'll do is I will kind of talk about the scheme through the lens of both a business, so how does a business engage with it, and then I'll talk about the system through the lens of an assessor and a moderator, so how do they get involved and what do they do, and then I'll talk about finally, just from the lens of an operator, how they engage with the system, just to really show what it is we do. So I'm just going to share my screen here, just so I can demonstrate some of this stuff live. So if you hold your horses, what we should be able to see, and I'll just get one of my presenters just to confirm that everybody can see the ConstructSafe website.
Yep,
yeah, that looks good.
Excellent. So the first thing is really just talk through the lens of a business that wants to engage with the plant operator competency scheme. How do we do that? If you go to the constructsafe.kiwi website and scroll down, companies, you'll see that there's an area for companies and how companies can engage with ConstructSafe. Here there's an overview video with my ugly face in it, and following on from that is some information and the ability for an organization to sign up. There's no costs associated with signing up, and so basically a business can just fill in this online form, attach your company's logo and press submit, and what you'll get in return are some login details. Once you've got those login details, what you then do is go back to constructsafe.kiwi and you can click login. I'll just show you that. And then the login details you're given, if you see here, the company login is where you would fill them in. And then once you press login, you would land on this page. Now, this gives you access to your own organization's information. So this icon here will give you your own organization's data. So this will be all of the people who work for you who have done a ConstructSafe test at whatever tier. Will give you stats and data to help see where people are successful, where they're not so successful, and who's engaged in testing. This particular icon gives you an opportunity to suggest questions and add content to the ConstructSafe tests if you wish. This is an area where you can give feedback. Here's the connection to our social media pages. And this, most importantly, is where an organization can apply to be an assessing organization, so to do this in-field verification. And so when you click apply to assess, and I don't know why, but it's sending me to the wrong page, you'd literally just fill in an online form, and that's as far as you need to go really with applying to be an assessor organization. Once your application has been approved, there's a $1,000 fee a year for an organization to be an assessor organization. And the reasoning for that is around data hosting. So obviously all of the competency records for your operators would be kept by ConstructSafe in the cloud, and there's a cost to us for hosting that data. So there's no excess generated by CHASNZ for that. That's a cost recovery mechanism. So once you're registered as an assessor organization, you then get this manage user icon, which again, for some reason, is kicking me into the wrong place. But through that manage user icon, you can get access to all the people that you've got registered as assessors. It's your portal, and it allows you to decide who can assess what within your organization, and also to nominate a moderator. So that's really all there is to engaging with it as a business, is signing up and applying to be an assessment center. So the next thing really is to look at it from an assessor's point of view. So what do I need to do to be an assessor? So for me to demonstrate that, I'm just going to flick to our app. So first of all, this is a live demonstration of our app from my mobile phone. So excuse me if a text message from my wife pops up during this asking me what I want for dinner. So the idea here is that to apply to be an assessor, they can use the app. So you download the app and you register, and that gives you some functionality. And within that app, any app user can change their profile. So you can see here on this profile page, you've got the ability to change your email address, your company that you work for, and your password. And you'll see at the bottom where it says apply to be an assessor. So this is where an individual applies to be an assessor. So they click that, it asks for some basic information. So those people who want to do in-field verification assessments just need to have passed the tier 2 test relevant for the plant that they're going to assess, and also be able to prove that they can do in-field assessments. They do that in 2 ways. So either we'll hold an existing tier 3 competency, which includes the competence to assess others, or if I click no, hold a unit standard 4098 certificate. We'll also accept the ConstructSafe supervising others 1-day course certificate, as well as evidence that somebody is competent to assess. So that you just basically say what you've got and add a photo of your certificate and press apply. Once a supervisor has applied and they've been approved, they can then do the in-field verifications from the app by just clicking assess. And then all they simply do is find the person on site that they're supervising who they want to view while they work, and just type that person's name in. So I've got a dummy account here. So as I type the person's name in, you'll see the drop-down menu appear. So I'll select the person, and you'll see it's a dummy account because that's actually Peter Silcock's photo. And then what I will select is the thing that I'm going to assess that person on, what piece of plant. Now, the system knows already which tier 2 tests I've passed, so I can only assess excavator operators because that's the only tier 2 test I've passed. So some assessors may have passed multiple tier 2 tests for multiple pieces of plant, so I'll be able to assess more than just excavators. I then select the learning outcomes. So these are 21 different groupings of tasks that I can observe. So if I just pick one, so if I pick a stockpile, what I can then do is just remind myself of what the specifics are for that particular assessment by pressing that green button. So if I'm looking at a person who's constructing a stockpile using an excavator, what the standard tells me is I need to observe 4 or test 4 things with that person, so that they know that they need to ensure the work area is flat and stable, that they travel forwards up ramps, and that they form the stockpile correctly following their job instructions, and that they ensure there are sufficient windrows on the ramp of the stockpile. So they're the 4 things I need to check, either by just observing the person working, or what I might need to do is just stop that person at some point and ask them some key questions. Here is where I would just really record what equipment. So for instance, it might be a Komatsu 8-ton excavator. And then also, once I've completed the observation, I would just pass any comments. So it might be just that they're a good operator. It may be that I would also record here anything that I had to remind them of, like reminded to wear a seatbelt, which is, we know, a common thing. And this is where, as an assessor, if I haven't looked at all of those learning outcomes, I need to specify it here that I haven't done the whole thing. Otherwise, the system will assume that I have. Then what I would do is attach a photograph of the individual, so you can see that's me. And then I'll just basically say whether the worker meets the standard or not. And if I say that they don't, another dialog box would come up and I'd have to explain why. So that's really it. That's actually how long it takes to record an in-field verification. So you can see there are safety observation that broadly only take 3 to 5 minutes to do. So the idea is a competent assessor would be expected to do 150 of those in a year, which is probably about 3 a week, which I think most assessors would easily be able to do. And they can assess any operator who's registered in the ConstructSafe system. They don't have to be an employee of the company they work for. So this gives us a tool to allow organizations to carry out in-field supervision assessments of subcontractors. If you're a competent assessor working for an organization, you may be selected to be the moderator. So you'll be the person who uses the login details to decide which of the assessors can assess what. So you have an overrule. So even though they've done the tier 2 test, say for rollers, you might not want them to do assessments for rollers. So you can deselect that. The idea about being the moderator for your employer is that also you repeat some of the assessments that have been carried out by your assessors to make sure you're coming up to the same answers. And the other thing is to respond to any feedback from operators. So they can provide feedback, as you can see here. So these are the list of assessments that have been done on me. And you can see that they're red if it was a negative outcome and green if it was positive. And I can click on, and you can see the assessor's comments are there, and I can provide my own comments. And if I say that it wasn't fair or there's something I didn't like about the assessment that was done on me as an operator, that will be checked by the moderator. So that's the moderator's role. And so really from a worker's point of view, which is the final piece of the puzzle, really straightforward. So for an operator, they obviously, like everybody, will have taken a ConstructSafe Tier 1 test, and then they need to take the Tier 2 test, which is relevant to the piece of plant that they operate. Once they pass that Tier 2 test, they then just need the app to download the app and register so that they can associate themselves with their employer. And they just need to seek out assessments. So the idea around an operator is that they need to be assessed at least once against each of those, for excavator, 21 learning outcomes in a year for them to maintain their health and safety competency. And if they do that, if they achieve that, then they won't need to repeat the Tier 2 test again unless the standard changes. So that then means that they can just engage in in-field verification assessments to prove that they're good at what they do. And as an operator, I can obviously use my assessments area to show people my experience and the things that I've done and the fact that I'm competent. And if I change in my profile who I work for, then from the drop-down list to select my new employer, then the new employer gets access to my competency records through that portal, so they'll be able to see what I've done and what I haven't done. So that's the idea, to make that really easy and to remove the paperwork. And so when people move jobs, they'll be able to take their competencies with them. So that really brings me to an end on the live demonstration of how to engage with the plant operator scheme from an employer and from an assessor and from an operator's point of view. So really that's just me handing back to answer any questions that there might be.
Okay, thanks a lot, John. I might just kick things off and just remind everyone that you can type in any questions that you have, and we've got around about 10 minutes to deal with any of those questions. Just because John's just finished going specifically into the Tier 2 competency for the plant operators, John, so the candidate needs to pass the test, which is an online test. Is that correct? Similar to a Tier 1 test?
Yeah, that's correct. So just like any ConstructSafe test, it's delivered through our network of testing centres. So I know that some organisations have got their own testing centres, so they can deliver that Tier 2 test themselves, or to contact a ConstructSafe test centre, and they'll come to you and put your people through that test. The tests that are currently available are for the excavator and for a loader. We are almost complete with developing the roller test, and we've got a plan in place to develop more pieces of plant as people adopt the scheme. So next in the queue for development will be a test and in-field verification process for people who operate trucks in construction, and we'll be starting development of that pretty soon.
Okay, and so you talked about there being those 21 verification points, and so do people have to be verified in each one of those points, or I mean, are there, and what happens if they don't get verified on some of the competency, or some of those points during a 12-month period?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So that was considered during the design, and it's the reason why it works this way. So if a person, because some people have pretty kind of focused jobs and may only routinely carry out only a number of those activities, they may not do them all over the period of a year or have the opportunity to be assessed against them all. That's not a problem. They'll just, when their 1 year expires, they'll just need to retake the ConstructSafe test for their plant, just to prove that their knowledge around health and safety for that piece of plant is current, and then they would just go back to engaging in in-field verification. And so obviously it would be in the interests of employers and operators to do the in-field verification assessments, and for that person to be able to demonstrate their skill in the field while they work, because if they do that, then there isn't a cost of further tests. So that there is no cost that we're passing on to organisations for in-field verification assessments. Assessors can do as many of those as they like and as many people as they like. And that's where we really see the value, is that a true picture of how people actually work and how they're working and unlocking some of those secrets of normal work is the sort of thing that we really want to be doing, rather than putting people through tests all the time.
Yeah. So just confirming, so people will do the test, which is the online test. Then the idea is hopefully they will go through and tick off all those 21 verification points. And if that's the case, then they don't have to resit the test. But if they miss even one of those, John, they would have to go back?
Yeah, within the year, they would have to go back and sit the test again.
Okay. All right. And I mean, it's, I guess there's been just recently, government's announced some changes around driver licensing, and in particular around the wheels, tracks and rollers, and removing that as a license endorsement. Do you see this program could be something that steps up into its place? I mean, how do you feel? How does CHASNZ feel about that? I guess maybe Chris would answer that.
Oh, to be honest, I think I'll bounce this one back to John, Peter. John, you were involved in that.
Yeah, look, I think I share the view of most people in the industry, is that the wheels, tracks and rollers endorsement adds very little value in terms of, it allows a person to demonstrate they can move a vehicle forwards and backwards to enable them to operate them on a road. And I know that there's a variability out there, that some organisations require that endorsement and some organisations don't, depending on the sort of work they do. I think probably the wheels, tracks and rollers thing causes more problems than it solves, in that it's not really a demonstration of competence. And so what's a really important, I suppose, separation to make is that an organisation who employs a person to operate a piece of plant for them is responsible for assuring themselves that that person has got the right technical skill to be able to operate that plant properly. And somebody shared with me recently the analogy that excavators can cost around $400,000. If you had a $400,000 Ferrari, you wouldn't let just anybody drive your Ferrari without you assuring themselves that they can drive that car competently. And so the technical skill of that person would be assessed on employment by the employer, and most organizations have got good systems to enable them to do that. I know that a lot of organizations require a person to come and work for a shift under observation to prove their technical competence before they're hired. What the ConstructSafe scheme then offers is then an in-field verification program that's ongoing that allows us to ascertain that a person is staying current and is demonstrating that they can carry out that work safely. And that doesn't exist at the moment. It's not easy to do. And I think that where organizations do it, they're doing it differently. So there's little cross-recognition. So absolutely, I think the ConstructSafe Plant Operator Competency Scheme would certainly help augment the current system and make it easier for people to reduce, as I say, the repetition and duplication of effort that's currently going on. Having one system that we can lean on and having something that's universally accepted.
Okay, thanks. John, the question here around the just the cost of the Tier 2 test, is there a price out there yet?
Yeah, there is. Yeah. So all ConstructSafe tests, from a CHASNZ point of view, from a ConstructSafe scheme point of view, cost $60. So the test fee is the same. The difference with the other tier test, Tier 1, is that you don't get a free retest. So that's a thing that's peculiar just to the Tier 1 test. And the actual costs vary depending on who you get to deliver that test for you. So if you use a public testing center, they obviously levy a fee over on top of the $60, and that's based. So we provide the information on who the test centers are, and so the advice is to shop around.
Yeah. So if you're doing the testing internally, you might absorb that cost of the person who's overseeing that assessment. But if you're doing it through another organisation, they're going to have their charge on top of the $60 that ConstructSafe charges.
Yeah, that's right. So just the same as the Tier 1 test. Okay.
So there's a question here around the how the assessments relate to the NZ QA type competencies. So could you answer that one for us too?
Yeah, so the NZQA standards were looked at and used by the group when they established those competencies, but all ConstructSafe competency frameworks have been developed by groups of field experts, so people from industry who do this for a living, so it hasn't been developed by me. I know very little about the complexities of plant operations on site. It's been a while since I've been involved in that, so I'd be the wrong person to do that. And so to allow industry groups to develop these competency frameworks, they haven't used the existing unit standard frameworks. They've developed these from scratch, but what we find is they broadly map together. But bearing in mind the unit standards that exist tend to be focused around technical skill, technical competence, whereas ConstructSafe is dealing with health and safety competence. There is some overlap, but there's a different focus.
Okay, thank you. So the next question is around with smaller companies and having, that may not have enough people to have a moderator and an assessor separately. So, what's happening? What happens with a small company that may have an assessor but not have anyone else to fill that moderator role?
Okay, so first of all, if you've got a small company who's got a single assessor, they would easily be able to fulfill both roles, in as much as the moderator role for the organisation in terms of managing the records doesn't take much time. It's fairly straightforward. Just after you basically log in and use the portal as a tool. For sole businesses where there's just got one assessor, ConstructSafe as a scheme also moderates all of the assessors and the moderators too. So they would receive their moderation externally from us, and so we keep a track of what's going on in the system as well. So there are kind of 3 levels of quality assurance. We have a level of assurance from the operators who are allowed to provide feedback and encouraged to do so every time they receive an assessment. So hopefully that would moderate and deal with any peculiarities or if they feel they're not being dealt with fairly. In organizations with multiple assessors, obviously we'd have a moderator who's repeating some of those assessments. So therefore, we get some internal moderation and dealing with some of those operator feedback. And then for companies that may only have one assessor, the ConstructSafe scheme provides, well, the ConstructSafe scheme for all organizations provides external moderation. So we keep an eye on trends. We've got algorithms that look at what's going on and flags up any anomalies for us to investigate. And so we'll continue to do that. The other side to this is that there are organizations that have registered an intent to deliver the moderator or assessor operation for businesses. So there are companies who are currently doing VOC work for you in the technical space or training for plant operators in the technical space. Some of those may start to offer the opportunity for them to do the in-field assessments using the ConstructSafe scheme.
Okay. Look, I don't think there are any further questions on the screen, but I did have a question. Chris, you mentioned around the pre-qual and looking at what could be done about that. I think certainly, you know, the bane of the industry to a certain extent with pre-qual, different clients requiring different pre-qual systems. Have you got any ideas? Has CHASNZ got some ideas about how it's going to address that issue?
Yeah, so this was the project I mentioned before that is currently live. So we're working with a bunch of clients, pretty big clients, to say, look, we're going to put a cross-certification scheme in. Will they recognise it? And the answer is yes. So they said, look, from their perspective, if we create a standard and the pre-qual organisations then will sign up to that standard. And then, for example, if you're a small organisation, you would simply go to a pre-qual provider, pass your pre-qual test or give them the information, be assessed by the pre-qual, and then the clients would be able to see that record as long as it's part of the scheme. So we think that within the next probably 8 to 12 months, this will go live and you'll start seeing this roll across the New Zealand landscape, and it'll be a vast simplification of the current complexity that's in pre-qual and save everybody a lot of time and money.
So that's essentially, Chris, a mutual recognition type approach to things rather than trying to just create one pre-qual system.
Yeah. Absolutely. We can't create one pre-qual system that's sort of anti-competitive in the market, but what we can do and look, we know that not all pre-qual systems are the same, so there's going to have to be a bit of levelling between them. Some of them are going to have to come up a bit, some of them might be a bit of overkill, but again, you know, that's the process that we're working through at the moment.
Okay, I'm conscious that we're over time, but we do have a question from Greg Lumsden, so I'll ask that question about the, you know, so an assessor who's registered with Connexus over a wide scope, do they actually have to still go through a separate process to be an assessor, John?
Sorry, I was turning on my microphone. So in short, they still will need to apply through the app to be an assessor. But any assessor who's registered through that system will be able to demonstrate their competence easy enough. So we're really quite straightforward. And bearing in mind, there's no costs associated with applying to be an assessor. It's an admin process from the ConstructSafe end, so that we've got a registration in the system, and they're connected, so they're able to use the app. And so the only thing is that they will need to be connected to an assessor organization. So whether they register their own organization as an assessor organization, or that they connect themselves to another organization. Hopefully that's a good enough answer. So in short, yes, they do need to register through ConstructSafe, but be really straightforward for them because they've already got the competencies they need.
Okay.
Peter, there was a couple of just other questions there. One from Cara about who we're using to develop our systems and apps. Cara, look, we use a company called the Learning Wave, who we've had a relationship. Sorry, not the Learning Wave, the Learning Machine, who we've had a relationship with for a long time. So that's our legacy support organisation that have built ConstructSafe with us. So from time to time that contract comes up and we do look at it. So they essentially own the IP around the app and how it works and the system how it works. We own the IP around basically the questions and all the data inside it. So that's our contractual relationship with them. It's really CHASNZ is too small to be able to do that ourselves. And the other one, John, there was a question there about if someone's assessed as competent operator, why do they need to be assessed yearly? Surely they will only get better, not worse. Have you got a response to that one?
Yeah, so I mean, I get that. I mean, the current situation is that depending on where you look, is that people pick arbitrary numbers from the air on when they need to refresh. So if you look at the current situation, depending on which organisation, they have to be reassessed or retrained every 2, 3, 4, or 5 years. I can't find any reasoning behind those arbitrary numbers. So in-field verification assessment is different. It's ongoing, and they are short, sharp observations while people work, and they're constant short observations, because that's really how, and that's recognizing that point, which is that people don't suddenly become not competent. You know, we all receive training, we build up experience over time, we get better and better over time. What happens is that if we haven't got somebody watching us work and checking in with us and just reminding us of the small pieces, then we get an erosion of skill, or we get bad habits coming in. So my analogy is, it's a bit like driving. You take your driving test, and then over time you start to adopt different habits. Like, I don't check my blind spots as often as I should, or know that I should, from when I was trained and when I was assessed from a driving test. I'm pretty good at wearing my seatbelt, but I know others aren't, and so those things come in. So the short answer there is that I agree with that comment, and that the in-field verification system acknowledges that, so allows us to, instead of having to refresh people's training or VOCs periodically, what we're saying is, as long as they're able to have their work supervised and observed over time, then they should be able to continue to do that and demonstrate their competence while they work, rather than being retrained or reassessed arbitrarily. So
to confirm, we don't actually have to resit the test every year. It's just the VOC.
No. So the people who need to resit the test every year will be those that haven't been able to demonstrate their competence through in-field verification.
Okay, guys, thanks a lot. And Annette, I know you've got another question, but I think we should wrap up now. Just reminding everyone that actually in the next few days, the recorded version of this is going to be available. It'll be published on the CCNZ website, and also promoted through our newsletter as well. So if you want to recommend to some colleagues or other people to have a listen, then that'll be there for you. And you guys might want to put it onto the CHASNZ site as well. Okay.
Thanks, Peter.
Thanks a lot. Okay.
And look, if there are other questions, there's Mel's email address there, mel@chasnz.org. Just flick them through and we can keep the conversation going if people would like to do that.
Thank you very much. Thanks to John and Chris for the presentation, and thank you to everyone who attended as well. Great.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.